So we're back here again at Ignite Automotive for our next episode with the GR Yaris. Today we're going to be looking at the engine. Now we've got it stripped out of the car. We're going to look at the components and what exactly we're going to be taking out and what we're going to be putting in. This is Joe and I'm Alan.
Nice to see you again.
I'll see you again, mate. Little dinky toy.
It is.
So yeah, it's quite a small little block now. It's been stripped off. It looks a really nice finish. I know we was discussing this earlier, but I was saying about the finish of the blocks, really nice and smooth. Can you just explain sort of something about the engine? Maybe look at the thickness of the cylinders. What we're saying about them? They're quite thick, aren't they?
Yeah. So yeah, they've got got a good wall thickness to the cylinders, which is obviously always a good benefit when you're increasing the power. It is an open deck block, so inherently with open deck block we can struggle when going to higher boost pressures with sealing the head gaskets. So yeah, it's one of those that when we're going to increase the performance of it, something we've got to look at addressing.
But I guess that's why we've got some of the equipment that we've got here. So obviously we've got the HKS gasket that we're going to fit when we fit this back up. We've also got the new studs to replace the original bolts that have been in there from factory. I think there's some new technology coming out now where the gaskets have actually got rings that cut into the block. Be quite interesting. There's some new stuff coming out. So obviously we haven't got one here, but I know that's coming, so that might be maybe the next level. How long do you think it's going to take until we're back up and running, or back building this engine back up?
So we're planning probably another half a day to a day, and we should be sort of engine assembled back up with all the new gaskets, studs, cams, etc. So
oh, wow.
yeah, it's not too much of a labour intensive process there, sort of.
And just for the viewers watching, what sort of timescales are we looking at from bringing the car in to where it was last week? How long did it take before you had the engine pretty much stripped down on the stand here?
So we were 6 hours to remove the engine, so like I said, so that was removing all the subframe, all the wiring harnesses, coolant lines, etc., draining all the fluids, also disconnecting all the pop shafts and everything like that. And then we were about another 4 hours from there once the whole complete engine and gearbox assembly is dropped out to get to how it is now.
So I don't actually think that's actually as long as what I thought it would take. So ultimately I think this is probably, if you're going to do a build like this, the only real way to do it, because it just makes everything so much more accessible. Yes. I noticed when I was kind of doing an intake on mine, some of the bolts are in from the back, yes, just simply because of the way that the engine is. And jobs when you're working behind with the bulkhead there, it makes it a lot more difficult. So that's going to make things a lot more simpler for you on the rebuild, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just going on to the head then. So obviously we've had a small look at the block. How long is it going to take now to get the cams, the springs, all the rest of the stuff taken out of this and the new stuff put in? How long do you think that's going to take you?
I think we'd be sort of like a couple of hours time. Obviously, it being a 3-cylinder, there is slightly less hardware to most 4 and 6 cylinders. So obviously, it does reduce the labour time there slightly. So yeah, I think we'll be looking sort of a couple of hours from when the cylinder is like this, compressing all the valves, swapping out all the springs, retainers, and then getting to the point where we can get the studs in the block and get the cylinder head on.
Just going on to the head studs, obviously we've seen that there's been some cases where we've had cylinder head failures, where the head's been lifting. So here we've got an uprated stud and nut conversion. So can you give me the advantages of this sort of system over the standard OEM bolts?
Yeah, so with any sort of aftermarket head stud, one of the benefits is, so the purpose when we are installing the head stud is to get the stud to the point of its elasticity. So we want the stud to be at the point where it is trying to contract. So when we tighten the bolt, we stretch it to the point that it is trying to contract back down. That is how it helps the cylinder head sealing process. With OEM bolts, you will find you will get a lot of friction. So due to the way that they're installed, you will get a lot of friction. So the torque can be not always as accurate, and also we are massively stressing the threads as well. Where on a stud, we don't generally tend to be stressing the actual threads in the block as much. So it can be a lot safer on that side of things as well. But yeah, obviously with any of these fasteners is the additional clamping force to keep the head gasket in one piece. That is sort of what we're looking for.
And I guess some of that's down to the material it's been made out of. Obviously, these will have been made for a cost, so mass produced. So they're not going to put a shitload of money. Edit that out. Not going to put a load of money into that. Whereas this one here, can be made a much more expensive item. So it'll obviously be made out of a lot better material.
Yes.
So a lot stronger. So, and I guess with these ones, as we discussed before, you can reuse them. Whereas these ones you'll have to measure them, make sure that they haven't come outside of their tolerance.
With the OEM fasteners, you will find that those always have to be replaced. And with the aftermarket hardware, what we'd have to do is, if we were in a position where we're tearing the engine down again to do additional work for further on down the line, we would have to measure the stretch on this stud to see if it's still within the manufacturer's tolerance. So with any of the studs, think of it like an elastic band. When we're stretching it, it's nice and tight. If we stretch it too much, it goes to the point that it snaps. But yeah, when we do stretch it, the elasticity is trying to pull it back in and try and clamp the gasket back together. So that's sort of the idea behind it.
So ultimately, what we're saying really here is that any time we go to a build like this, when we're talking a lot more boost, and a lot more pressure, this is going to be the option we want to be taking.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, excellent stuff. Is there anything else you want to mention about the head studs or any of the other components, or are we happy?
I think in terms of the head stud side of things, I think we're sort of fairly clear on that. One topic that we'll just maybe bring up is why particularly on this engine is it that you do see it where head gaskets are failing early. We are having to go to the point of fitting head studs a lot sooner than, say, if we were on a steel block or something like that. And a lot of it is due to the fact that it's aluminium, so that aluminium is obviously a little bit softer, and obviously the open deck design does take a lot of the structure and the overall sealing face of the gasket. Whereas we've got all this material that we haven't got here, that is less material that we do have a head gasket sealing face.
Yeah, it's got less clamping face, haven't you?
So I think that's sort of just covers a bit as to why we are installing these hardware from sort of fairly basic modifications. It would have been years ago if we were on steel blocks or something like that. It wouldn't be something that would be needed as soon, and also the fact of it being a 3-cylinder as well also plays a part in it as well.
Maybe only a baby 3-cylinder, but she's certainly a good one.
Yes,
as we see. It's interesting as well, while we've got it stripped off, the size of the ports. I think they're massive. I look at this and I think they're some fairly big ports for a 3-cylinder, 1.6 engine. Looks massively over-engineered, typical Toyota.
Very good design. There's a lot of new technology come out in this. So one of the big things that Toyota did go to was quite a wide valve angle, which inherently, from years gone by, a lot of the cars would go for a narrower valve angle, and to be able to get the tumble into the cylinder to get a better homogeneous mixture in the air and the fuel. So what Toyota have done is, where they've gone for a wide valve angle, they've actually just put a slight ramp out of the intake, so that actually promotes the tumble into the cylinder, even with the wide valve angle. And obviously, the actual design of the ports, it's a very nice, good, clean port onto the back of the inlet, on the inlet valve. So there's plenty of potential there for flow. I think it's the design-wise in the cylinder head is very, very impressive.
I just think, looking at the whole package, everything is just built so well. From my perspective, I've seen a few engines. I'm nowhere near to the degree that you will have, but even from a layman term, looking at the thickness of the walls, everything in this engine just looks like it's been built or over-engineered. So really impressive stuff. Future builds, I know this build particularly is not going with rods and pistons. Where do you think there would be an advantage to maybe going down that level? Do you think that's when you go to the next level and you push in extreme powers and you may be looking at cylinder sport to go with it? Or do you think the system, the pistons and the rods in it at the minute would be, suffice for where we sit.
I think in terms of the connecting rods, I do think they will be able to withhold quite a substantial amount of torque. So they are steel forged rods from the factory, so they are very strong. With the pistons, they do have quite a lot of coatings on the ringlands and the side skirts of the pistons. So there's a lot of technology there gone into the friction reduction inside the reciprocating mass. So in terms of the OEM hardware, I do think Toyota has done a very good job of doing the best they can. I think one of the failures we may potentially start to see is potentially piston failure. If you start running a bit hot, or you're starting to lift the head gaskets from the open deck design, that's potentially where we start seeing a few of the failures. But I think it'll be one of those sort of time will tell. More people are pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think we're still quite early doors with this engine, so although things have been tested to a degree, because now people are starting to push it, we're starting to see where it is failing. We're not quite there yet, so I think people are just doing things because they think they should, and it's kind of the route that you normally go down. You strip the engine down, you put pistons and rods in. Whether it's actually required or necessary for the power level that they're going for is kind of another question to be asked. But so people could be going over engineered just because they should, and maybe it's just not really required at that point. But
okay, I think a lot of them as well. Just to put the point across. For a road application, most people aren't going to be going to massive extremes and wanting to be running some of the figures that some people have out there. I think the majority of people are going to be more focused on mid-range response, torque in the mid-range, etc., rather than chasing the overall peak power, particularly for UK roads.
And I think that's the important thing that I'm trying to get across with you, is that maybe build the car and put the equipment in it for what you actually want to use it for. Don't just be the big I am and spend thousands putting parts into a car that you don't require, because if you're going to run X amount of power and you're absolutely going to require a piston and a rod change, because it's a lot more work than where we're at right now. There's a lot more stripping, a lot more stuff to do, and a lot more machine work potentially there. For what people are doing, it may not be required. So just really, it's build it for what you want to use it for. And I think that's kind of where I'm going with this. That so many people just get talked into equipment and parts that they don't really require for their build. And I think it's really important to try to think where you want to be with the car. So from my perspective, I don't really have more questions. So is there anything else you really want to point out on the car?
I think maybe just a couple of things to point out is obviously, like we said, with the cylinder head design, very innovative design. And when we even look at the actual machining on the cylinder head and the block themselves, it's not just a rough casting that has been thrown out the door. There's a lot of places where you can see it has had machine work. So Toyota has taken great a lot of pride there to go that bit extra and give a better finished product, and even down to with the cam timing, for what we can do now, almost 70 degrees of advance or retard on the cam timing is it's one of those. It's all very new technology, and I think a lot of people will be looking at the characteristics of this engine and starting to do the same. From the having the DI injection and the port injection. Very good system. Obviously the DI does have its benefits, but also has its drawbacks. So the drawbacks are where the port comes into play. So very good design there. So yeah, I think it's one of those that's there's been a lot of thought in this engine, and like I said, I think a lot of the technology will be taken on to other cars in the future.
I think you kind of see it well engineered, just for the fact that you just have to do so much minimal work to put in. Or to be able to push so much more power through this engine without opening it up like we've done now. Just put a set of cams and a set of springs in there, and you're pretty much ready to rock. Just give me a little bit of an insight now as to where we go for our next episode with this engine. At what point, where do we go from where it sits right now?
So over the next couple of days, we will be installing the head studs, installing the springs, retainers, etc. And we will get the engine sort of all back together. And we're aiming for the end of this week to have the engine back in the car, potentially be up and running sort of the end of this week. So yeah, next time we see all of this, the engine will be as one.
Don't forget, everyone, like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in our next episode. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.